The gunshot echoed through the alley like thunder trapped between brick walls. Noah Blake didn't feel heroic as the bullet tore through his shoulder. He just felt stupid. The woman's scream pierced the night air as his knees hit the wet pavement. Two shadows fled. Blood spread across his shirt like spilled ink. "Stay with me," she begged, her designer perfume mixing with the smell of gunpowder. His vision blurred. The last thing he saw was her terrified face hovering above him, illuminated by a single flickering streetlight. Before we dive into this story of sacrifice, second chances, and unexpected connections, I want to invite you on this journey with me. Stick around until the very end. You won't believe where Noah and Charlotte's story leads. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 3 hours earlier, Noah Blake's phone had buzzed with another ride request. He stared at the cracked screen of his 10-year-old sedan, watching the pickup location blink on his GPS. Downtown, 10th and Morrison. The part of the city where rent cost more per month than he made in half a year. "Just 2 more fares," he muttered to himself, rolling his shoulders to fight off the exhaustion creeping through his muscles. 2 more, and you can call it a night. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. His shift had started at 3 in the afternoon, over 8 hours of driving through traffic, making small talk with strangers, and pretending his lower back wasn't screaming at him with every pothole. But the electric bill was due in 3 days, and Eli's school had sent home another notice about the upcoming field trip. $45. Might as well have been $45,000. Noah pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the well-lit safety of the commercial district. His car rattled over the uneven streets. The suspension shot months ago, but repairs perpetually postponed. The radio played quietly, some late-night talk show he wasn't really listening to. His mind was already at home, imagining Eli curled up on Mrs. Chen's couch next door, hopefully asleep by now. The boy was 8 years old and too damn understanding for his age. "Dad, I don't need to go on the field trip," Eli had said that morning, his voice small but trying to sound grown. "We can save the money." Noah had ruffled his son's hair, fighting back the familiar ache in his chest. "We'll figure it out, buddy. We always do." The truth was, they'd been figuring it out for 3 years now, ever since Sarah had left. No dramatic fight. No other man. She just looked at their tiny apartment one morning, looked at their struggling bank account, looked at Noah with something like pity mixed with exhaustion, and said, "I can't do this anymore." The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. The custody arrangement was simple. Eli stayed with Noah. Sarah sent a card on his birthday if she remembered. Noah shook off the memory as he turned onto Morrison Street. The buildings here reached toward the sky like fingers clawing at heaven, glass and steel monuments to wealth he'd never touch. His passenger app showed he was 2 minutes away. He slowed down, squinting at the street numbers. That's when he saw the alley. It wasn't on his route, just a narrow gap between 2 office buildings, but it cut through to 11th Street and would save him maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds he could use to get 1 step closer to home, to collapsing into his own bed for 5 hours before starting all over again. Noah turned the wheel. The alley was darker than he'd expected. The streetlights from Morrison faded quickly, swallowed by the shadows cast by buildings that probably cost more to maintain than his entire neighborhood was worth. His headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, catching dumpsters, fire escapes, the usual urban detritus. Then his headlights caught something else. 3 figures near the far end of the alley. 2 men, 1 woman. Something about the tableau made Noah's foot ease off the gas pedal. The woman had her back pressed against the wall, her hands clutching a purse to her chest. The 2 men stood too close, their postures aggressive, predatory. Noah's first instinct was to keep driving. "Not your problem," the tired voice in his head whispered. "You've got a kid at home. You can't afford to be a hero." But his foot found the brake instead of the gas. He'd grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to recognize the geometry of violence before it erupted. He'd seen enough muggings, enough shakedowns, enough moments where intervention meant the difference between someone going home safe or not going home at all. And he'd promised himself, after Eli was born, that he'd never be the kind of man who just drove past. Even if that promise had already cost him 2 broken ribs from breaking up a convenience store robbery last year. Even if being that kind of man meant working 3 hours past exhaustion to pay bills that never seemed to shrink. Noah put the car in park and killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed against his ears. Through the windshield, he could see the scene more clearly now. The woman was young, mid-30s maybe, though it was hard to tell in the inconsistent light from a flickering security lamp mounted on the wall behind her. She wore a navy business suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had come partially loose. Her face, illuminated by harsh shadows, showed fear but also defiance. The two men were tall, heavy-set, dressed in dark clothes that seemed designed to blend into shadows. One of them was speaking, his voice low but aggressive. Noah couldn't make out the words through the closed car windows, but the tone was universal, the sound of someone used to getting what they wanted through intimidation. Noah's hand hesitated on the door handle. The smart play was to call 911 and wait. Let the professionals handle it. But response times in this part of the city were slow, even with the fancy addresses. By the time police arrived, it could be over. And not in the woman's favor. He thought of Eli. What would he tell his son if he just sat here? What lesson would that teach? Noah opened the door. The sound made all three figures turn toward him. Noah stepped out of his car, his heart hammering against his ribs. Up close, the two men looked even bigger. One had a scar running down his left cheek. The other wore a gold chain that caught the light from the security lamp. "Walk away," Gold Chain said, his voice flat. "This doesn't concern you." Noah forced himself to walk forward, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. Every survival instinct he possessed was screaming at him to get back in the car, but his legs kept moving. "Looks like the lady wants to be left alone," Noah said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why don't you guys call it a night?" Scarface laughed, a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. "You got no idea what you're stepping into, driver boy." He'd spotted the rideshare sticker on Noah's windshield. "This is business, real business, not your minimum wage concern." The woman's eyes met Noah's. They were striking even in the dim light, a green so vivid it seemed to glow. In that brief moment of connection, he saw a complex mix of emotions. Fear, yes, but also anger. And something else, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger was stupid enough to help her. "My purse is worth more than you make in a year," she said suddenly, her voice stronger than Noah expected. She was talking to the men, but her eyes stayed locked on Noah's. "Take it. Take the credit cards, the cash, everything. Just leave." "We don't want your purse, Ms. Hayes," Gold Chain said, and there was something in the way he said her name, a familiarity that suggested this wasn't a random mugging. "We want your signature. You know what signature. You've got until midnight to make the right choice." Ms. Hayes. The name tickled something in Noah's memory, but he couldn't place it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Gold Chain had just pulled something from his jacket pocket, something that caught the light with a dull metallic gleam. A gun. Time seemed to slow down, the way people always said it did in moments like this. Noah saw the weapon rise, saw the woman's eyes go wide, saw his own chance to run, to dive back into his car, to save himself. Instead, his body made a decision his brain hadn't quite caught up to yet. Noah lunged forward, putting himself between the gun and the woman. He heard her gasp, felt her hands clutch at his jacket. The two men seemed almost surprised, as if they hadn't expected anyone to be this monumentally stupid. "Last chance," Noah said, though his voice cracked halfway through. "Walk away." Scarface stepped closer. "You really want to die for some rich bitch who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire?" "Nobody has to die," Noah said. "Just put the gun away and leave." For a moment, Noah thought it might actually work. Gold Chain's eyes flickered with something. Uncertainty, maybe, or recalculation. These weren't street thugs looking for a quick score. This was planned, orchestrated. And Noah had just become an unwanted variable in their equation. Then Scarface's hand moved, faster than Noah expected. The punch caught him in the stomach, driving the air from his lungs. Noah doubled over, gasping, the world tilted. He felt the woman's hands on his shoulders, trying to pull him back, trying to get him to run. But running wasn't an option anymore. Gold Chain raised the gun, pointing it directly at the woman's face over Noah's hunched shoulder. "Stupid," he said. "So stupid." Noah straightened up despite the pain lancing through his abdomen. He spread his arms wide, making himself a bigger target, a bigger shield. "You'll have to go through me." "Okay," Goldchain said simply. The gunshot was the loudest sound Noah had ever heard. The bullet hit him in the left shoulder, spinning him half around. For a strange, disconnected moment, there was no pain, just a sense of impact, like someone had punched him really hard. Then the fire came, spreading from the entry wound like gasoline ignited in his veins. Noah's legs turned to water. The pavement rushed up to meet him. He hit hard, his head bouncing off the concrete. Somewhere far away, he could hear the woman screaming, could hear footsteps running, away or toward, he couldn't tell, hands on his face, soft hands, shaking. "Stay with me," a voice begged. "Oh God, please stay with me." "What's your name? Can you hear me? What's your name?" Noah tried to answer, but his tongue felt thick and useless. The flickering security light above seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Fast at first, then slower, slower. The woman's face hovered above him, her vivid green eyes the last bright thing in a world going dim. "Eli," he managed to whisper. "My son. Tell him." But darkness swallowed the rest. Noah's consciousness returned in fragments, scattered puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. First, pain. A deep throbbing ache that radiated from his left shoulder and seemed to pulse through every nerve ending in his body. Second, softness. He was lying on something impossibly comfortable, so different from his lumpy mattress at home that his first confused thought was that he'd died. And this was some kind of waiting room for the afterlife. Third, light. Warm sunlight streaming across his face. The kind of pure morning light he usually only saw for a few minutes each day before his alarm dragged him into another shift. Noah's eyes cracked open. The ceiling above him was white. Not the water-stained, yellowing white of his apartment ceiling, but pristine white that seemed to glow. A modern light fixture hung centered above him, all clean lines and brushed metal. He turned his head slightly, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain through his shoulder. He was in a bed, not a hospital bed, though there was medical equipment nearby, an IV stand with a bag of clear fluid dripping into a line that led to his right arm. The bed itself was enormous, covered in white linens that probably had a thread count higher than his credit score. Beyond the bed, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a view of the city skyline that made his breath catch. He was up high, really high. The buildings he could see were the same glass and steel towers from downtown, but he was looking at them almost eye level. The morning sun painted them in shades of gold and amber. In the distance, he could see the river cutting through the city like a silver ribbon. "You're awake!" Noah's head snapped toward the voice, too fast, sending stars across his vision. When they cleared, he saw her standing in the doorway. The woman from the alley. She looked different in the daylight, without fear twisting her features. Her dark hair was loose now, falling past her shoulders in waves. She wore a white silk robe that probably cost more than his car, and her feet were bare on the hardwood floor. Those green eyes he remembered were studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Where?" Noah's voice came out as a croak. He tried to sit up, but his shoulders screamed in protest and his head swam with dizziness. "Don't move," she said quickly, crossing the room in 3 strides. Her hands pressed gently but firmly on his good shoulder, easing him back down. "You were shot. The bullet went through, but you lost a lot of blood. The doctor said you need to rest." "Hospital," Noah managed. "I should be in a hospital." "You were. Briefly." She pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, her posture rigid despite the expensive furniture. "The EMTs stabilized you. The doctors removed the bullet fragments and closed the wound, but the hospital was asking questions I couldn't answer yet, and those men—" She paused, something flickering across her face. "Fear, anger? It wasn't safe, so I had you brought here." "Here," Noah repeated, looking around again. "Where is here?" "My home. The penthouse at Morrison Tower." The pieces clicked together. Morrison Tower, one of the most exclusive addresses in the city, condos that started at $3 million. He'd driven past it 1,000 times, never imagining he'd see the inside. "You can't just kidnap people from hospitals," Noah said, though the protest came out weaker than he intended. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across her lips. I didn't kidnap you. I hired private medical care. There's a nurse who's been monitoring you. She just stepped out. And before you ask, yes, I can afford it. I can afford anything I want. The way she said it wasn't a boast, just a statement of fact, delivered with the weariness of someone who'd learned that money didn't solve every problem. My son, Noah said suddenly, trying to sit up again despite the pain. Eli, I need to call him. He's only 8. He'll be worried sick. Mrs. Chen next door was watching him, but already taken care of. She held up a phone. His phone, he realized, the screen still cracked. I found this in your car. Your password was 0712. Your son's birthday, I'm guessing? Noah's jaw tightened. You went through my phone. I called the most recent number. A Mrs. Chen answered. I told her you'd been in an accident, but you were okay, and that you'd call her in the morning. She was worried but understanding. The woman set the phone on the nightstand beside the bed. I didn't tell her about the shooting. I thought you might want to control that narrative yourself. Noah closed his eyes, relief warring with frustration. What time is it? Almost 9 a.m. You've been unconscious for about 8 hours. She paused. The nurse said you'd wake up soon. Your vital signs have been strong. I need to go home. You can barely lift your head. I need to see my son. And you will. Tomorrow maybe if the doctor clears you. Today, you need to rest. Doctor's orders. Also my orders since I'm paying for all of this. Noah opened his eyes to glare at her. I didn't ask you to pay for anything. No, she agreed quietly. You didn't ask for any of this. You just stepped between me and a bullet. Her voice dropped even lower. Why did you do that? It was the question Noah had been asking himself in the moments before he'd lost consciousness. He didn't have a good answer then, and he didn't have one now. Seemed like the right thing to do, he said finally. The right thing. She repeated the words like they were in a foreign language she was trying to translate. You don't even know me. Didn't need to. You needed help. I'm not a good person, she said so softly he almost didn't hear it. You risked your life for someone who... She stopped herself, standing abruptly. I'll get the nurse. She'll want to check your vitals now that you're awake. Wait. Noah caught her wrist with his good hand. She froze, looking down at where his calloused fingers encircled her slender wrist. What's your name? Charlotte, she said. Charlotte Hayes. The name triggered the memory he'd been grasping for in the alley. Charlotte Hayes, CEO of Hayes Global Investments. He'd seen her face in the business section of newspapers he sometimes picked up from coffee shop tables, one of the youngest female CEOs in the country. Worth billions, according to Forbes, and he'd just grabbed her wrist with his sweaty, probably blood-stained hand. Noah let go like he'd been burned. Sorry, Why were those men after you? They said something about a signature. Charlotte's expression shuddered, walls slamming down behind her eyes. That's not your concern. They shot me. I think that makes it my concern. They shot you because you interfered in something that had nothing to do with you. Her tone had gone cold, corporate. This was the voice that probably terrified boardrooms. I'm grateful for what you did, truly. But the best thing you can do now is recover and go back to your life. Forget this happened. Kind of hard to forget getting shot. I'll make sure you're compensated. Medical bills covered, lost wages, plus a substantial sum for, I don't want your money. The words came out harsher than Noah intended. Charlotte blinked, clearly not used to people refusing her offers. Everyone wants money, she said. Then I guess I'm not everyone. Noah closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. I just want to go home to my kid. Silence stretched between them. Noah could hear the distant sound of traffic from far below, the hum of expensive climate control, the beep of his IV monitor. Tomorrow, Charlotte said finally. If you're strong enough tomorrow, I'll have my driver take you home. But tonight, you rest. Please. The please surprised him. It sounded genuine, stripped of the corporate armor. Okay, Noah agreed. Tomorrow. Charlotte nodded and moved toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at him. Thank you, she said. I know you don't want to hear it, but thank you. What you did, I've never had anyone do something like that for me before. Before Noah could respond, she was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Noah stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. He'd taken a bullet for a billionaire. He was recovering in a penthouse that probably had a better view than most people's dream vacations. And tomorrow, he'd go back to his cramped apartment, his beat-up car, his endless string of rideshare shifts to make ends meet. None of it made sense. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Noah grabbed it awkwardly with his right hand, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. Mrs. Chen had sent a text. "Eli wants to talk to you. Call when you can. Hope you're okay, dear." Noah pressed the call button. "Mrs." Chen answered on the first ring. "Noah! Thank God! That woman who called, she said you were in an accident." "I'm okay, Mrs. Chen. Really, just a little banged up." "Is Eli there?" "Right here, hold on." Shuffling sounds, then his son's voice, high and worried. "Dad?" "Hey, buddy." Noah had to clear his throat to keep his voice steady. "I'm okay. Mrs. Chen said you were in an accident. Are you hurt?" "Just my shoulder. I'll be home tomorrow, okay? I promise." "Where are you?" Noah looked around the opulent bedroom, at the million-dollar view, at the IV drip feeding medicine into his veins. "Hospital," he lied. "But it's boring here. Tell me about school yesterday. Did you finish that science project?" As Eli launched into a detailed explanation of his papier-mâché volcano, Noah felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. This voice, this kid, this love, was why he'd stepped into that alley. Eli was growing up in a world that could be cruel and random and violent, but Noah wanted him to believe it could also be fair. That people could be good, that heroes existed, even if they drove beat-up sedans and could barely pay their electric bills. Even if being a hero meant bleeding out on dirty pavement while billionaires decided whether you were worth saving. They talked for 15 minutes before Eli's voice started to fade with sleep. Mrs. Chen had let him stay up worrying. Noah said goodnight, promised again to be home tomorrow, and hung up. The nurse came in shortly after, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who checked his vitals, adjusted his IV, and gave him 2 pills for the pain. "Ms. Hayes asked me to tell you that if you need anything at all, just press the call button." The nurse gestured to a small remote on the nightstand. "I'll be in the next room all night." "I'll be fine," Noah said. "Thank you." The nurse smiled. "You're a lucky man. That bullet was 2 inches from your heart. 2 inches, and we'd be having a very different conversation." After she left, Noah lay in the absurdly comfortable bed, watching the sunlight fade from the windows and the city lights begin to sparkle in the gathering dusk. His shoulder throbbed despite the painkillers. His future felt uncertain in ways it hadn't 24 hours ago. But he was alive. And tomorrow, he'd go home. The darkness behind his eyelids was different from the darkness of unconsciousness. This was just sleep. Honest, exhausted sleep. Noah let himself sink into it, unaware that tomorrow would bring complications he couldn't begin to imagine. Unaware that Charlotte Hayes was standing in her study at that very moment, staring at security footage of the alley, watching a stranger throw himself in front of a bullet for a woman he didn't know. Watching it over and over again, trying to understand what kind of person did something like that. And beginning to realize that saving his life might have been the easy part, Noah woke to the smell of coffee and the distant clatter of dishes. For a disoriented moment, he thought he was back in his apartment, that Eli was making breakfast in their tiny kitchen. Then the pain in his shoulder reminded him exactly where he was and why. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows was different from yesterday, softer somehow, filtered through a thin layer of clouds. Noah pushed himself up carefully, testing the limits of his injury. The pain was still there, sharp and insistent, but manageable. His head felt clearer, the fog of trauma and medication finally lifting. Someone had left clothes on the chair beside the bed. Not his clothes. Those were probably still blood-stained and ruined, but new ones. Expensive-looking jeans, a soft gray t-shirt, even socks and underwear still in their packaging. Everything was exactly his size. Noah felt a flush of embarrassment imagining Charlotte Hayes guessing his measurements, or worse, having someone check the tags on his old clothes. Getting dressed took longer than it should have. His left arm was essentially useless, bound in a sling that the nurse must have added while he slept. Noah managed to pull on the clothes one-handed, sweating by the time he finished. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. He needed to get home. Back to reality. Back to Eli. Noah opened the bedroom door and stepped into a hallway that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Polished hardwood floors, minimalist art on pristine white walls, recessed lighting that created pools of warm illumination. Everything was clean, expensive, intimidating. Following the smell of coffee led him through a living room that could have swallowed his entire apartment. A kitchen opened off to one side, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. Charlotte stood at the counter pouring coffee from a French press into 2 white mugs. She'd changed from the silk robe into dark slacks and a crisp white blouse. Her hair was pulled back again, and she wore minimal makeup, but somehow still looked like she'd stepped out of a boardroom. "You shouldn't be walking around," she said without turning around. "How did you know I was here?" "Security cameras, motion sensors. This entire floor is wired." She turned, holding out one of the mugs. "Coffee? It's Ethiopian, single origin." Noah had no idea what single origin meant, but he took the mug. The coffee was black and strong and probably cost more per pound than he spent on groceries in a week. It tasted like heaven. "Thank you," he said. "For the clothes, too." Charlotte shrugged, a gesture that seemed too casual for someone wearing a $5,000 watch. "I had my assistant pick them up this morning. She's good at guessing sizes." They stood in awkward silence, sipping coffee. Noah could see the entire city spread out beyond the living room windows, a view that probably never got old for people who could afford it. For him, it just felt surreal, borrowed, like he was standing in someone else's life. "I called for a car," Charlotte said finally. "It'll take you home whenever you're ready, but the doctor wanted to check you one more time before you leave." "I'm fine." "You were shot less than 48 hours ago. You're not fine." Noah set down his coffee mug, the clink of ceramic on marble louder than he intended. "Look, I appreciate everything you've done. Really. But I need to get back to my son. He needs to see that I'm okay." "I understand." Charlotte's voice remained neutral, controlled. "Give the doctor 15 minutes, then you can go." Before Noah could argue, a woman in a white coat emerged from another hallway. The doctor was younger than Noah expected, maybe early 40s, with her dark hair pulled into a professional bun. "Mr. Blake," she said warmly, "I'm Dr. Reeves. How are you feeling this morning?" "Ready to go home." "I'm sure you are. Let's take a look at that shoulder first." The examination was quick but thorough. Dr. Reeves checked his wound, his range of motion, his vitals. She asked questions about pain levels and dizziness, and a dozen other things Noah answered with increasing impatience. Charlotte watched from across the room, her expression unreadable. "Everything looks good," Dr. Reeves said finally. "Better than I expected, actually. You're healing well. But I need you to understand, you were very, very lucky. The bullet missed your subclavian artery by less than an inch. If it had hit that artery, you would have bled out in minutes. No amount of pressure or medical intervention could have saved you in that alley." Noah felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd known it was serious, but hearing it laid out so clinically made it real in a new way. "I'm writing you prescriptions for pain management and antibiotics," Dr. Reeves continued, pulling out a prescription pad. "You need to keep the wound clean and dry. Change the dressing twice a day. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity. And you need to follow up with your primary care physician in 1 week." "I don't have a primary care physician." Dr. Reeves and Charlotte exchanged a glance. "Then we'll arrange one," Charlotte said. "That's not negotiable." Noah wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was creeping back in. "Fine. Can I go now?" Dr. Reeves nodded, handing him the prescriptions. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Blake. You did a very brave thing. Try not to make a habit of it." After the doctor left, Charlotte walked Noah to the elevator. The hallway seemed longer than it had on the way in, or maybe Noah was just walking slower, his body reminding him of its limitations. "The driver's name is Marcus," Charlotte said as they waited for the elevator. "He'll take you wherever you need to go." "My car is in the parking garage here. I had it towed from the alley. The keys are with the concierge downstairs." Of course she had. Noah shouldn't have been surprised, but he was. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, doors sliding open to reveal a mirrored interior that probably cost more than his annual salary. Noah stepped inside, then turned back to face Charlotte. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, looking smaller somehow without the armor of her office or the trappings of her wealth around her. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. The medical care, the clothes, all of it. You don't need to thank me. I'm the reason you were shot." "You didn't pull the trigger." "No, but—" Charlotte stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "Those men were there because of me, because of choices I made, business decisions that have consequences beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. You got caught in the crossfire of a world you don't belong in." "Maybe," Noah agreed, "but I'd do it again. If I saw someone in trouble, I'd help. That's just who I am." "I know," Charlotte said softly. "That's what I don't understand. In my world, nobody does anything without calculating the return on investment first. Nobody risks anything unless they're guaranteed to gain more. But you just jumped in front of a bullet for a stranger. No hesitation, no calculation." The elevator door started to close. Noah stuck his good arm out, stopping it. "Not everyone's motivated by profit," he said. "Some people just try to do the right thing." "The right thing," Charlotte repeated, that same strange tone from yesterday, like she was testing the words, seeing if they fit in her mouth. "The right thing put you in a hospital bed. The right thing almost made your son an orphan." "But it didn't. I'm still here." This time. The elevator door tried to close again. Noah let it, watching Charlotte's face disappear behind the polished steel. As the elevator descended, he caught sight of his reflection, tired, injured, wearing clothes that cost more than his weekly grocery budget. He looked like someone pretending to be something they weren't. The lobby of Morrison Tower was as impressive as the penthouse, all polished marble and designer furniture, with a massive floral arrangement in the center that probably required its own staff to maintain. A few well-dressed residents glanced at Noah as he crossed to the concierge desk, their gazes curious and slightly disapproving. He didn't belong here. Everyone could see it. The concierge, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, handed over Noah's car keys without question. "Ms. Hayes asked me to give you these as well," he said, sliding an envelope across the desk. Noah opened it. Inside was a stack of cash and a business card. The cash had to be at least $2,000. The business card was simple. Charlotte Hayes, CEO. Hayes Global Investments, and a phone number. "I can't take this," Noah said, trying to hand it back. "Ms. Hayes anticipated you might say that," the concierge replied with a small smile. "She instructed me to tell you it's not a gift. It's payment for medical consultation regarding a security matter. Consider it a contract fulfillment." Noah almost laughed. Even in generosity, she had to frame it as business. He pocketed the envelope, knowing he'd probably need it to fill the prescriptions and cover the shifts he'd miss while recovering. Outside, a black town car idled at the curb. The driver, Marcus presumably, was a massive man in a dark suit with the kind of build that suggested either former military or current bodyguard, possibly both. "Mr. Blake?" Marcus's voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could bench press a truck. "I'll be taking you home today. Where are we headed?" Noah rattled off his address, watching Marcus's expression carefully for any sign of judgment. If the driver thought anything about the massive difference between the gleaming towers of downtown and the rundown neighborhoods of the East District, he didn't show it. The ride took 40 minutes, though it would have taken Noah less than 20 in his own car. Marcus drove with careful precision, taking streets Noah had never bothered with, avoiding potholes and rough patches that Noah had long since accepted as unavoidable. The smooth ride should have been relaxing, but Noah felt tension building in his shoulders with every mile that took him away from Charlotte's world and back to his own. Reality was waiting for him, and reality didn't care that he'd spent the night in a penthouse. His apartment building came into view, a 3-story brick structure that had probably been nice in the 1970s, but now bore the weathered look of deferred maintenance and absentee landlords. Marcus pulled up to the curb, and Noah saw the curtain in Mrs. Chen's ground floor window twitch. Within seconds, his neighbor's door flew open and Eli came running out. "Dad!" Noah barely had time to brace himself before his son collided with him, arms wrapping around his waist in a fierce hug. The impact sent pain shooting through Noah's shoulder, but he didn't care. He wrapped his good arm around Eli, breathing in the familiar smell of his son's shampoo. Cheap, but effective. Bought in bulk from the discount store. "Hey, buddy," Noah said, his voice rough. "I told you I'd come back." "Your arm is in a sling." Eli pulled back, his brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, wide with worry. "You said it was just your shoulder. That looks really bad." "It's not as bad as it looks. Promise." Mrs. Chen appeared in her doorway, wringing her hands. She was a tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she'd been a rock for Noah these past 3 years. Watching Eli when Noah's shifts ran long, always having a plate of food ready when they came back hungry, never asking for anything in return except maybe help fixing her garbage disposal once in a while. "Noah, dear, you look terrible," she said, which was her way of saying she was worried. That woman who called, she said it was a car accident, but her gaze shifted to Marcus, who was standing beside the town car like a Secret Service agent, and her eyes widened. "What's going on?" "It's a long story, Mrs. Chen, and I promise I'll tell you everything. But right now, I just need to get upstairs and rest." Of course, of course." Mrs. Chen shooed them toward the building. "Eli, honey, help your father. And Noah, I made soup. I'll bring some up later." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mr. Blake, Miss Pamks. Hayes wanted me to make sure you had everything you needed. Is there anything I can help with?" Noah looked at the imposing man, then at his son clutching his good hand, then at his apartment building with its chipped paint and squeaky door. 2 worlds colliding on a cracked sidewalk. "I'm good," Noah said. "Thanks for the ride." Marcus nodded and handed Noah a card. Apparently, everyone in Charlotte's orbit communicated via business cards. "If you need anything, call that number, day or night." Ms. Hayes was very clear about that. As the town car pulled away, Eli tugged on Noah's hand. "Dad, who was that lady who called? And why did you come home in a car like that? And why won't you tell me what really happened?" Noah looked down at his son's worried face and made a decision. Eli was 8, but he was smart. He deserved some version of the truth. "Let's go inside," Noah said. "I'll tell you everything." Their apartment was on the 3rd floor, upstairs that creaked with every step. Noah's shoulder throbbed by the time they reached the landing, and he had to pause to catch his breath. Eli watched him with those 2 knowing eyes, saying nothing but clearly adding up all the evidence that his father was hurt worse than he'd admitted. Inside, the apartment looked exactly as Noah had left it 2 days ago. Small but clean, furnished with second-hand finds and yard sale treasures. The couch sagged in the middle. The TV was an old model with a crack in the corner of the screen, but there were pictures on the walls. Noah and Eli at the park, at the beach, at Eli's school play. Moments of happiness captured and displayed. This was home. Humble, struggling, but home. Noah sank onto the couch, and Eli climbed up beside him, careful not to jostle his injured side. For a long moment, they just sat there together, and Noah felt something in his chest unknot. This was what mattered. Not penthouse views or single-origin coffee or expensive clothes. This. His son, safe and warm beside him. "Okay," Noah said finally. "Here's what happened." He told Eli an edited version, that he'd seen a woman in trouble, that he'd tried to help, that someone had a gun and he'd gotten hurt. He left out the worst parts, the moments where he'd thought he might die. The blood and the fear and the darkness. But he didn't lie. He didn't make himself out to be a hero, just someone who tried to do the right thing. Eli listened in silence until Noah finished, his face serious in that way that made him look older than 8. "You could have died," Eli said quietly. "But I didn't." "You could have, though. And then I wouldn't have a dad anymore." Tears welled up in Eli's eyes. "Mom already left. If you died too, I'd be all alone." Noah pulled his son close with his good arm, feeling his own eyes burn. "Hey, no, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere, okay? I'm right here. And I'm going to be more careful, I promise." "Don't promise," Eli said, his voice muffled against Noah's chest. "You can't promise that. Bad things just happen sometimes." The wisdom in those words, the resignation, the acceptance of life's unfairness, broke something in Noah's heart. No 8-year-old should understand mortality that clearly. But Eli had learned early that parents could leave, that security was temporary, that love didn't always mean staying. They sat like that for a while, father and son, holding on to each other in their small apartment while the city moved on outside their window. Eventually, Eli's breathing evened out, and Noah realized he'd fallen asleep, exhausted by worry and relief. Noah shifted carefully, laying his son down on the couch and covering him with the worn blanket from the armrest. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Charlotte. Marcus said you made it home safely. How are you feeling?" Noah stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How was he feeling? His shoulder hurt. He was exhausted. He was overwhelmed. He was home with his son, which was all he'd wanted, but somehow it didn't feel like closure. It felt like the middle of something, not the end. He typed back, "Fine, thanks again for everything." The response came immediately. "The doctor's appointments are set up. First one is Thursday at 2 p.m. Marcus will pick you up. I can drive myself. With one arm? Please, humor me." Noah almost smiled despite himself. Even via text, she was bossy. "Okay, Thursday." "Good. Rest. Doctor's orders." Noah set down the phone and looked around his apartment. Everything was familiar. The water stain on the ceiling he kept meaning to report to the landlord, the cabinet door that didn't close all the way, the draft that came through the window frame every winter. This was his life. This was real. The penthouse felt like a dream already, fading in the harsh light of day. But his shoulder ached, a physical reminder that it had been real. Charlotte Hayes was real. The men with the gun were real. And whatever business they'd wanted her signature for, that was real too. Noah's phone buzzed again. This time it was Mrs. Chen. "Soup is ready. Come down when Eli wakes up." He texted back a thank you and settled deeper into the couch beside his sleeping son. His eyes were heavy. The pain medication was wearing off, and he should probably take another pill, but the prescription bottles were still in the pharmacy bag Marcus had given him, sitting by the door where he'd dropped it. Just a few more minutes, Noah thought. Just a few more minutes of holding on to this moment before reality came crashing back in. He didn't mean to fall asleep, but his body had other ideas. The last thing Noah saw before his eyes closed was Eli's peaceful face, and the last thing he thought was that he'd taken that bullet 100 times over to keep this boy safe. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that across the city, in her pristine office with its panoramic view, Charlotte Hayes was staring at her phone, at the simple text exchange, at the words, "Fine. Thanks again for everything." She should have felt relieved. The stranger who'd saved her life was home safe with his son. She'd paid for his medical care, given him money to cover his expenses, set up follow-up appointments. She'd done everything right, everything appropriate. The debt was settled. So why did it feel unfinished? Charlotte pulled up the security footage from the alley again. She'd watched it at least 50 times now, trying to understand the exact moment when Noah Blake had made his decision. Frame by frame, she could see him step out of his car, see him approach despite having every reason to drive away, see him put himself between her and the gun. There. That moment. That single frame where his body language shifted from caution to commitment, when he decided that her life was worth more than his own safety. She didn't understand it. In her world, every action had a motive, every sacrifice had an expected return. People didn't just throw themselves into danger for strangers. They calculated, they negotiated, they protected their own interests first. But Noah Blake hadn't calculated anything. He'd just acted. Charlotte closed the video and opened a different file. Background information her head of security had compiled on Noah Blake. It didn't make for pleasant reading. Divorced 3 years ago, single father, working as a rideshare driver despite having a degree in engineering from a state university. Credit score hovering just above poor, behind on several bills. No savings to speak of. Medical debt from when his son had broken his arm 2 years ago. A life of quiet struggle, of making do, of choosing his son's needs over his own, day after day after day. She should let it go. Send a fruit basket or something. Move on with her life. But Charlotte Hayes hadn't built a billion-dollar company by ignoring her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that Noah Blake was important, that what he'd done meant something beyond a simple act of bravery, that she owed him more than money and medical care. She owed him the truth about why those men had been in that alley, about what signature they'd wanted, about the danger that might not be over. Charlotte picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Ethan," she said when her head of security answered. "I need to know everything about the extortion attempt. Everything. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." "Ms. Hayes, we've been over this. The police are investigating. You're safe here. The building has—" "I'm not worried about me," Charlotte interrupted. "I'm worried about Noah Blake. If those men know he intervened, if they think he can identify them, he could be in danger." "I'll look into it." "Don't look into it. Know it. I need to know if he's safe. If his son is safe." There was a pause. "Ma'am, with all due respect, your involvement with Mr. Blake should probably end here. Any further contact could complicate things legally and personally." "Noted," Charlotte said. "Now do what I asked." She hung up and walked to the window. Somewhere out there, in a neighborhood she'd probably never visited, Noah Blake was waking up on a lumpy couch with his son beside him. Living a life so far removed from hers they might as well be on different planets. But for one moment in a dark alley, their orbits had intersected, and Charlotte was beginning to realize that intersection had changed something fundamental. She'd spent her entire adult life building walls, around her company, around her wealth, around her heart. She'd learned early that vulnerability was weakness, that caring too much made you a target. Then a rideshare driver with kind eyes and calloused hands had stepped in front of a bullet without hesitation, and those walls suddenly seemed less like protection and more like prison bars. Charlotte pressed her forehead against the cool glass and made a decision. She'd spent her whole life calculating returns on investment. Maybe it was time to do something that didn't make sense on a spreadsheet. Maybe it was time to follow Noah Blake's example and just do the right thing, consequences be damned. Her phone rang, Ethan calling back already. "What did you find?" Charlotte answered. "Something you need to hear in person," Ethan said, his voice tight. "How soon can you get to the office?" Charlotte was already grabbing her coat. "I'm on my way." As she rushed out of her penthouse, she spared one last glance at her phone. At Noah's simple texts, at the distance between his world and hers. That distance was about to get a lot smaller, whether either of them was ready for it or not. The Hayes Global Investments building occupied an entire city block in the financial district. 37 floors of steel and glass that reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror. Charlotte's private elevator took her directly to the executive floor, bypassing the lobby full of employees who would want updates, reassurances, explanations she didn't have time to give. Ethan Martinez was waiting in her office, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something Charlotte recognized as controlled alarm. In the 5 years he'd been her head of security, she'd never seen him genuinely rattled. He was former Secret Service, the kind of man who'd thrown himself in front of actual presidents. Nothing shook him. Until now. "Show me," Charlotte said, not bothering with pleasantries. Ethan pulled up footage on the large monitor mounted on her wall. Security camera footage from the alley, but from a different angle than the one Charlotte had been obsessing over. This one showed the moments after the shooting, after Noah had fallen, after Charlotte had dropped to her knees beside him. "Watch the background," Ethan said, pointing to the shadowy corner of the frame. Charlotte leaned forward. There, barely visible in the darkness, was a third figure, someone who'd been standing back, observing. The two men who'd confronted her had run after the shooting, but this person had stayed. Watching, recording, maybe. The figure's face was obscured, but something about their posture suggested calculation, not panic. "Who is that?" Charlotte asked. "We don't know yet. But look at this." Ethan switched to another video. This one was from a traffic camera 2 blocks away, time-stamped 40 minutes after the shooting. The same figure, now walking under a streetlight. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a dark jacket, and carrying what looked like a professional camera with a telephoto lens. He was documenting it, Charlotte said, her blood running cold. This wasn't just an extortion attempt. Someone wanted evidence. It gets worse. Ethan pulled up another file, this one a series of photographs. Noah's apartment building, Mrs. Chen's door, Eli walking to school, his small backpack bouncing against his shoulders. These were uploaded to an encrypted server 3 hours ago. Same digital signature as other surveillance we've been tracking for the past 2 months. Charlotte felt something sharp twist in her gut. They're watching him. They're watching his son. We think they're building leverage. If you won't cooperate, they hurt the man who saved you, and if that doesn't work, they go after his child." Charlotte's voice was flat, but inside she felt something volcanic building. "Who's behind this?" Ethan hesitated, which told Charlotte everything she needed to know. He'd found something, and she wasn't going to like it. "The extortion isn't about money," he said finally. "It's about the hospital acquisition. Someone wants you to walk away from the St. Mary's deal." Charlotte's mind raced. St. Mary's Medical Center was a struggling inner-city hospital that Hayes Global had been in negotiations to acquire for the past 6 months. Not to shut it down and sell the real estate, which was what most investors would do, but to renovate and keep it operational. It was a money-losing proposition, but Charlotte's mother had died in that hospital 20 years ago, receiving the best care the overworked staff could provide despite the facility's limitations. The acquisition was personal, not profitable. "Who benefits if we walk away?" Charlotte asked, though she was already running through the list in her head. "Meridian Development Group. They've been trying to buy the property for 2 years. If you pull out, the hospital board will have no choice but to sell to them. They'll level it and put up luxury condos within a year." James fucking Hendricks. Charlotte rarely cursed, but the name tasted like poison. James Hendricks, CEO of Meridian. Old money trying desperately to look like new money. They'd clashed before at charity galas and business conferences, their fundamental philosophies incompatible. He saw the city as a monopoly board. She saw it as something that could actually be improved if you were willing to sacrifice profit for purpose. "We can't prove it's him directly," Ethan cautioned. "The men we've identified from the alley footage are hired contractors, ex-military, current criminals for hire. The paper trail is deliberately obscured." "But it's him." "Probably, yes." Charlotte walked to her window, looking out over the city she'd built her empire in. Somewhere out there, Noah Blake was resting on his second-hand couch, thinking this was over. Thinking he could go back to his normal life of driving strangers around and worrying about electric bills and his son's field trip fees. He had no idea he'd stepped into something that went far beyond a random mugging. No idea that his simple act of courage had made him a target in a war he didn't even know existed. "What are our options?" Charlotte asked. "Legally, we go to the police with what we have, get protection details assigned. But Hendricks has connections in the department. Nothing we can prove, but enough that I wouldn't trust Noah Blake's safety to a patrol car doing occasional drive-bys." "What else?" "We could hire private security, put a team on Blake and his son 24/7. It's what I'd recommend for you, frankly. You should have had a detail on you that night, but you insisted on—" "I know what I insisted on." Charlotte had spent years trying to maintain some semblance of a normal life outside her corporate identity, walking alone sometimes, driving herself places, refusing to live in a bubble of bodyguards and paranoia. That independence had nearly gotten her killed. "What about Noah? Will he accept protection?" Ethan's expression said he already knew the answer. "Based on his profile? He'll refuse. He'll say he can't afford it, even if you offer to pay. He'll say he doesn't want his son growing up scared. He'll say a lot of reasonable things, and then he'll do something unreasonable like try to handle this himself." Charlotte almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. That sounded exactly like the man who'd stepped between her and a bullet. "Then we don't give him a choice," she said. "How fast can you get a team to his building?" "Already done. I took the liberty of assigning 2 agents when we identified the surveillance. They're in an unmarked car half a block from his apartment. Eyes on his door, his son's school, the likely approach vectors." "Good." Charlotte pulled out her phone, scrolling to Noah's number. Her finger hovered over the call button. What was she supposed to say? "Hi, remember when you saved my life? Well, now your life is in danger because of mine. And by the way, so is your son's." "Ms. Hayes," Ethan said carefully, "there's another option, one you're not going to like." "Tell me." "You walk away from the St. Mary's deal. Announce it publicly, make it clear you're not interested anymore. Hendricks gets what he wants and the threat disappears. Noah Blake goes back to his regular life, none the wiser." Charlotte turned to look at her head of security. Ethan met her gaze steadily, and she could see he was serious. This was the practical solution, the one that cost the least and risked the least. Give up 1 hospital to save 1 man and 1 child. "No?" Charlotte said. Ma'am, no. If we give in now, what's next? Every time someone threatens violence, we capitulate? Every time a bully with deep pockets wants something, we just hand it over? Charlotte's voice rose despite her attempt to stay controlled. That hospital serves 40,000 patients a year, low-income families, people without options. If Meridian turns it into condos, where do those patients go? To other hospitals, which are already overcrowded. You've seen the projections. Emergency room wait times in that district are already averaging 6 hours. Close St. Mary's, and people will die waiting for care they can't access. Charlotte shook her head. I won't do that, not even to protect Noah Blake. Then you need to tell him what's happening. Give him the information to protect himself. Charlotte looked down at her phone again, at Noah's contact information. This morning he'd texted that he was fine, that he was home with his son, that he was grateful. By tonight she'd be telling him that his life was still in danger, that his brave, selfless act had painted a target on his back. She pressed the call button. The phone rang 3 times before Noah answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Hello? Noah, it's Charlotte. Charlotte Hayes, I'm sorry to wake you, but we need to talk. Is everything okay? Did something happen with the medical bills? No, nothing like that. This is... Charlotte paused, choosing her words carefully. Can you talk privately? Is your son nearby? She heard rustling, footsteps, a door closing. Okay, I'm in my bedroom. What's going on? You sound worried. Charlotte glanced at Ethan, who nodded. She put the phone on speaker. Noah, the men who confronted me in the alley, the shooting wasn't random. It was planned. They were trying to force me to back out of a business deal. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully. Okay, but that's not really my problem anymore, is it? I mean, I'm sorry you're dealing with that, but it is your problem, Charlotte interrupted, because they know you intervened. They have photos of you, of your apartment, of your son. The silence that followed was different, heavy. Charlotte could almost hear Noah's mind working through the implications. Photos, he repeated finally. What kind of photos? Ethan spoke up. Mr. Blake, this is Ethan Martinez. I'm Ms. Hayes' head of security. We've identified surveillance on your residence that began approximately 48 hours ago. Your son was photographed walking to school this morning. We believe this is an attempt to create leverage against Ms. Hayes. Leverage. Noah's voice had gone flat. You mean they're threatening my kid to get to her? That's our working theory, yes. Jesus Christ. More sounds. Pacing, maybe. A hand running through hair. And you're telling me this now? After 2 days? What if they'd already... We have security watching your building, Charlotte cut in. You've been protected since we identified the threat. But Noah, we need to talk about next steps. I can arrange more comprehensive protection or no. No? No protection? No security teams? No, whatever you're planning, I can't afford it, and I won't accept it as charity. Charlotte closed her eyes. Ethan had called it exactly. This isn't charity. This is me taking responsibility for putting you in danger. You didn't put me in danger. I chose to help you. That was my decision. A decision that might get your son hurt. The shout surprised Charlotte herself. She rarely raised her voice. Ethan was watching her with careful neutrality, the kind of expression that meant he was filing away information about her emotional state for later analysis. Noah's response was quieter. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think that's all I've been thinking about since you told me? But I can't live in fear. I can't raise Eli to be afraid. And I definitely can't have armed guards following us around like we're in some kind of action movie. Then what do you suggest? Charlotte forced herself to match his calm tone. Because doing nothing isn't an option. I suggest you do what they want. Back out of your deal, make them happy, and this goes away. I can't do that. Why not? What's one business deal compared to people's safety? Charlotte opened her mouth to explain about the hospital, about the patients, about the larger implications, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she make him understand that this was about more than money or pride? That some things were worth fighting for even when the personal cost was high? It's complicated, she said finally. Then uncomplicate it. Choose the option where my son is safe. What if I can't? What if both options lead to different people being in danger? Noah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that Charlotte felt in her bones. Then I guess you need to figure out which people matter more to you, the ones you know or the ones you don't. The line went dead. Charlotte stared at her phone, feeling like she'd been slapped. Ethan cleared his throat. That went well, he said dryly. He's right, about the choice. Charlotte sank into her desk chair, suddenly exhausted. I'm asking a stranger to stay in danger because I won't compromise on a business deal. When you say it out loud, it sounds insane. It's not insane. It's principled. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, my principals are about to get a single father and his 8-year-old son killed. Ethan walked over and leaned against her desk, his expression serious. Ms. Hayes, you hired me to keep you safe. But more than that, you hired me because I understand that safety sometimes means fighting, not hiding. Those 40,000 patients at St. Mary's, they matter. Noah Blake and his son matter. Sometimes you don't get to choose between good outcomes. Sometimes you have to choose between bad outcomes and try to make the best one possible. And what's the best bad outcome here? We protect Blake whether he wants it or not. We move forward with the St. Mary's acquisition, and we find a way to put James Hendricks behind bars before this escalates further. All of that sounds great in theory. In practice, Charlotte's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Back off St. Mary's. Final warning. Next time we won't miss. Attached was a photo. Noah's apartment building taken from across the street. The angle was perfect to show Eli's bedroom window, the blinds open, a nightlight visible inside. Charlotte felt rage replace fear, white-hot and clarifying. These people had threatened a child, had taken pictures of where he slept, had made it clear they knew exactly how to hurt the one person Noah cared about most. She forwarded the message to Ethan. How fast can you trace this? Burner phone. They'll ditch it within the hour, but Ethan was already typing on his laptop. The metadata might give us something. Location services, tower pings. Give me 20 minutes. Charlotte stood and grabbed her coat again. Keep me posted. I'm going to Blake's apartment. That's not a good idea. I don't care. He needs to see that photo. He needs to understand this is real. Send it to him. Email, text, carrier pigeon. Going there in person puts you both at risk. Then come with me. Bring whoever you need. But I'm going. Ethan recognized the tone. He'd heard it before, usually right before Charlotte made a decision that couldn't be unmade. Give me 5 minutes to brief the team. While Ethan made calls, Charlotte walked to her window one more time. The city stretched out below her, thousands of buildings and millions of lives, all intersecting and affecting each other in ways big and small. She'd spent her career believing that money could solve most problems, that the right investment, the right strategy, the right deal could make things better. But you couldn't make a deal with people who took pictures of sleeping children. You couldn't negotiate with threats to innocence. Sometimes money and power weren't enough. Sometimes you needed to be willing to fight. Marcus brought the car around in 7 minutes, accompanied by 2 additional SUVs. Charlotte's small convoy headed east, away from the gleaming towers of the financial district and toward the neighborhoods that most people in her economic bracket pretended didn't exist. The transition was gradual but unmistakable. Buildings got shorter and shabbier, storefronts had bars on the windows, empty lots replaced manicured parks. This was where Noah Blake lived, where he raised his son, where he made his life work on a rideshare driver's salary and whatever odd jobs he could pick up. The convoy pulled up outside Noah's building just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Charlotte saw the unmarked security car Ethan had mentioned, 2 agents inside trying and failing to look casual. One of them spoke into a radio as Charlotte's car arrived. They're reporting in, Ethan said from beside her. No suspicious activity in the past 4 hours. Blake and his son had soup with the neighbor at 3. Blake walked his son to the corner store at 4. They've been inside since. Charlotte nodded, barely listening. She was focused on the building itself, trying to reconcile this structure. Worn but maintained, poor but proud, with the penthouse Noah had woken up in 2 days ago. 2 different worlds. She dropped him back into his without a second thought, assuming the gulf between them was unbridgeable. Maybe it was, but that didn't mean she could just leave him to drown. Marcus opened her door. 2 of Ethan's team flanked her as she walked to the building entrance. The door wasn't locked, probably broken, she thought with a spike of worry. Anyone could walk in. Anyone could reach Noah's third-floor apartment without any barrier at all. The stairs creaked under their feet. Somewhere above them, a baby cried. Cooking smells. Something with cumin and garlic, wafted from behind one of the doors. Normal life happening all around, oblivious to the danger lurking just outside. Charlotte knocked on apartment 3B. The door had a peephole, and she saw the light change as someone looked through it. A long pause. Then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. Noah opened the door 6 inches, the security chain still attached. His face was drawn, exhausted. The sling immobilized his left arm. He looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in days, which was probably accurate. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know. Can I come in?" "My son is here." "I know that too." "This involves him, Noah. You need to see something." Noah's jaw tightened, but he closed the door long enough to unhook the chain, then opened it wider. Charlotte stepped inside, followed by Ethan. The rest of the security team stayed in the hallway, much to the apparent fascination of a neighbor who'd cracked her door to investigate the commotion. The apartment was small but clean, decorated with the kind of care that comes from having limited resources and making them work. Pictures covered one wall. Noah and Eli at various ages, various places, various moments of captured joy. No pictures of Eli's mother, Charlotte noticed. That absence said volumes. Eli was sitting on the couch, a tablet in his hands. He looked up when Charlotte entered, his brown eyes widening. "You're the lady from the phone," he said. "The one who called Mrs. Chen." "I am," Charlotte said, kneeling down to his eye level. "My name is Charlotte. Your dad helped me when I was in trouble." "He got shot because of you." The accusation was delivered without malice, just a child's straightforward assessment of cause and effect. Charlotte felt it like a punch anyway. "Yes," she agreed. "He did, and I'm here to try to make sure nothing else bad happens." "Eli, go to your room," Noah said quietly. "But Dad, room, now, please." Eli recognized the tone that meant this wasn't negotiable. He shot Charlotte one more evaluating look, then trudged down the short hallway and closed a door behind him. Noah waited until they heard the door latch. "Show me." Charlotte pulled out her phone and handed it to him, the threatening text and photo already displayed. She watched Noah's face as he processed what he was seeing, his building, his son's window, the implicit threat clear even without words. Something changed in Noah's expression. The exhaustion fell away, replaced by something harder. Something that reminded Charlotte that this wasn't just a struggling single father, but a man who'd thrown himself in front of a bullet without hesitation. There was steel underneath the kindness. "Who sent this?" Noah's voice was calm, too calm. "We believe it's connected to a man named James Hendricks," Ethan said. "CEO of Meridian Development Group. He wants Ms. Hayes to walk away from a hospital acquisition. When she refused to be intimidated, he escalated. To threatening my kid." "Yes." Noah set the phone down carefully on his coffee table, like he was afraid if he held it any longer he might crush it. "And you came here to tell me this in person because I need you to understand this is real," Charlotte said. "This isn't going away. Whether I back out of the deal or not, Hendricks knows you can identify the men who tried to extort me. You're a loose end, and he doesn't like loose ends. So what am I supposed to do? Run, hide, uproot my son's entire life because I tried to help someone? You accept protection. You let us keep you and Eli safe while we build a case against Hendricks, and you trust that I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Noah laughed, a bitter sound without any humor. "Trust you? I don't even know you. You show up in your expensive car with your security team and your billion-dollar problems, and you expect me to just… What? Trust that you'll handle it? That money will fix everything?" "Money can't fix everything," Charlotte said quietly. "Believe me, I know. But it can hire the best security, the best lawyers, the best investigators. It can put resources into protecting you that you couldn't access on your own. And what's the price? Because there's always a price with people like you." The words stung, probably because they were partially true. Charlotte was used to transactions, to exchanges of value, but this wasn't business. This was something else entirely. "No price," she said. Just Let me do this. Let me try to make this right. Noah studied her for a long moment, and Charlotte had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing past the expensive clothes and the practiced corporate composure to something more vulnerable underneath. I don't want Eli to know, he said finally. Whatever protection you're talking about, it has to be invisible. He can't grow up afraid. He can't think the world is so dangerous that we need armed guards just to exist. We can be discreet, Ethan assured him. Your son won't know we're there. And when this is over, when you catch this Hendricks guy or whatever the end game is, you disappear. We go back to our normal life. No strings attached. Charlotte nodded, ignoring the strange pang that promise created. No strings attached. Okay. Noah rubbed his face with his good hand. Okay. Do whatever you think is necessary. But if anything happens to my son, if he gets hurt because I helped you, I'll never forgive you. Or myself. Nothing is going to happen to him, Charlotte said, with more confidence than she felt. I promise. The door to Eli's room cracked open. Dad, is everything okay? Everything's fine, buddy. Come here. Eli emerged cautiously, looking between the three adults. Noah pulled his son close with his good arm, and Charlotte saw the fierce protectiveness in every line of his body. This was what mattered to him, not money or status or comfort, just this boy, safe and loved. Charlotte envied him that clarity of purpose. I have to go, she said, standing, but Ethan will coordinate with you about the security details. If you need anything at all, you call me directly, day or night. I still have your number from before, Noah said. Good. Use it. As Charlotte turned to leave, Eli spoke up. Are you rich? Eli. Noah's voice carried embarrassment, but Charlotte just smiled. Very rich, yes. Then why don't you just pay the bad guys to go away? Out of the mouths of babes. Charlotte knelt down again, meeting Eli's serious gaze. Because sometimes paying bad guys just makes them bolder. Sometimes you have to stand up to them, even when it's scary. Your dad understands that. It's why he helped me. He's brave, Eli said simply. The bravest person I've ever met, Charlotte agreed, meaning it. She left before the emotion clogging her throat could escape as tears. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Ethan waited patiently, knowing better than to comment on whatever he was seeing in her face. Double the security, Charlotte said. I want eyes on that building 24/7. I want tracking on Hendricks and every person he's been in contact with for the past year, and I want our legal team to dig into Meridian Development Group until they find something we can use. Already in motion, Ethan said. Anything else? Charlotte looked back at the closed door of apartment 3B. At the life continuing inside, probably Noah explaining something to his son, probably trying to maintain normalcy while his world tilted on its axis. Find me a way to end this, Charlotte said. Soon, before that boy loses his father. We're working on it. They descended the creaking stairs and emerged into the evening air. The security detail reformed around Charlotte, creating a bubble of protection she'd lived with for so long she barely noticed it anymore. But now, walking toward her car, she felt the weight of it differently. The privilege of safety purchased with money. The luxury of never having to worry that someone might hurt the people you loved because you couldn't afford to stop them. Noah Blake didn't have that luxury. He had a deadbolt and a security chain and his own courage, which had already nearly gotten him killed once. Charlotte slid into the back of her car and pulled out her phone. She drafted a text to her legal team, to her board of directors, to every person in her organization who had a stake in the St. Mary's acquisition. The message was simple. We're moving forward. Accelerate the timeline. I want this deal closed in 2 weeks. If Hendricks wanted a war, she'd give him one. But it would be fought in boardrooms and courtrooms with lawyers and accountants as weapons, not in dark alleys, not with guns and threats, and definitely not with Noah Blake and his son as collateral damage. Marcus pulled away from the curb, and Charlotte watched Noah's building disappear in the side mirror. Somewhere in that structure, in that small third-floor apartment, a man was probably tucking his son into bed and telling him everything would be okay. Charlotte was going to make damn sure that promise came true, even if it cost her everything. The next 5 days passed in a strange rhythm that neither Noah nor Charlotte could have predicted. On the surface, their lives continued along parallel tracks. Noah drove his rideshare routes and tried to be present for Eli's homework and bedtime stories, while Charlotte navigated board meetings and legal negotiations that stretched late into each night. But underneath the ordinary routines, everything had shifted. Noah noticed the security first in small ways. A car that seemed to be perpetually parked across from his building, different vehicles but always occupied. A woman jogging the same route past Eli's school every morning and afternoon, her pace too measured to be random exercise. A man reading a newspaper in the corner store who never seemed to buy anything. They were good at being invisible, but Noah had grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to spot surveillance, whether it came from cops or criminals. He didn't tell Eli. That was the hardest part, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while knowing that armed professionals were tracking his son's every movement. Eli chattered about school and complained about homework and begged for pizza night like nothing had changed, and Noah smiled and nodded and felt the weight of secrets pressing against his chest. Charlotte called every evening at 7. Always the same time, like clockwork. At first, the conversations were brief and businesslike. Status updates, safety confirmations, nothing personal. But by the third night, something had loosened in their exchanges. "How was your day?" Charlotte asked, and it sounded like she actually wanted to know. "Long," Noah admitted. He was sitting on his fire escape, the phone pressed to his ear, watching the sun set over the clustered rooftops of his neighborhood. "Had a passenger throw up in my back seat. That was fun." "I'm sorry." "Part of the job." "How about you? Any progress on your hospital thing?" There was a pause. Noah had started thinking of those pauses as Charlotte deciding how much truth to share. "We're closing the acquisition next Tuesday, assuming nothing derails it." "Like a CEO getting shot in an alley?" "That would definitely qualify as a derailment." Noah surprised himself by laughing. It felt good, that release of tension. "You know, when I woke up that morning, getting shot wasn't on my agenda. Really threw off my whole schedule." "Mine too," Charlotte said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I had a breakfast meeting planned. Very important. Croissants were involved." "Well, I'm sorry my bleeding interrupted your pastries." "I'll survive. The question is whether you're surviving, really, not the answer you give when you want me to stop worrying." Noah looked down at the street below, at the kids playing stickball near the corner, at Mrs. Chen watering the scraggly plants in her window box. His life, continuing. "Some days are better than others. Eli asked me yesterday why I keep looking out the window. I told him I was bird watching." "Did he believe you?" "He's 8, not stupid, but he let it go." Noah shifted, his shoulder protesting the movement. "This can't go on forever, Charlotte. The watching, the waiting, it's wearing on me." "I know. We're working as fast as we can." "Are you?" The question came out sharper than Noah intended. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're moving forward with your business deal while my kid has invisible babysitters and I'm jumping at shadows. That's not fair." "Isn't it? You said 2 weeks. It's been 5 days and I don't see anything changing." Charlotte's voice went quieter. "Hendricks made another move today. He filed an injunction trying to block the acquisition. Said we didn't disclose conflicts of interest. It's garbage, but it'll tie us up in court for at least a few days. Every delay gives him more time to what? Come after us again?" Noah stood abruptly, his free hand gripping the fire escape railing. "Maybe you should just give him what he wants. Let him have the hospital. Let this end." "I can't do that." "Why?" "I get that it's personal or whatever, but is it worth people's lives?" "Yes," Charlotte said simply. "That hospital serves 40,000 patients a year, low-income families, people who can't afford private care. If Meridian tears it down, those people have nowhere to go. Emergency rooms in that district are already overcrowded. People will die, Noah. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in ways we can directly trace, but they'll die because they couldn't get care in time." Noah closed his eyes. He wanted to argue, to insist that Eli's safety mattered more than statistics and projections. But he'd grown up in neighborhoods like the one around St. Mary's. He'd sat in those overcrowded emergency rooms with Eli when money was even tighter and the fever was too high to ignore. He knew what Charlotte was talking about wasn't abstract. It was real, immediate, life and death. "I hate that you're making sense," he said finally. "I hate that I'm putting you in this position." Yeah, well, we've established I'm not great at making smart decisions. Jumping in front of bullets, remember? That was the smartest decision anyone's made in my vicinity for a long time, Charlotte said softly, even if it did interrupt my croissants. After they hung up, Noah sat on the fire escape until full dark, listening to the sounds of the city settling into night. Somewhere out there, Charlotte was probably still in her office, working through legal documents and strategic plans, trying to save a hospital while also trying to save him. The absurdity of it should have made him angry. Instead, it just made him tired. Inside, Eli was asleep on the couch, his tablet playing some cartoon on mute. Noah carried his son to bed, tucking him in and brushing hair off his forehead the way he'd done since Eli was a baby. This, right here, this was everything. His son, safe and dreaming, untouched by the adult complications swirling around them. Noah would take 1,000 bullets to keep it that way. Across the city, Charlotte was indeed still in her office. It was past midnight and she'd sent her assistant home hours ago. The only light came from her desk lamp and the perpetual glow of the city outside her windows. She'd been reviewing depositions from the hospital board members, looking for any angle that might accelerate the timeline. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Found something. Need to brief you. Tomorrow morning?" Charlotte texted back, "Now, come up." While she waited, Charlotte walked to her window and pressed her palm against the cold glass. She could see the East District from here if she knew where to look. The neighborhoods where people struggled and survived and made lives with whatever resources they could cobble together. Where Noah Blake was probably sleeping now, his injured shoulder healing, but his peace of mind shattered. She'd done that to him, not directly, not intentionally, but the chain of causation was clear. Her decision to buy St. Mary's had triggered Hendrix's extortion attempt. That attempt had put her in that alley, and Noah's heroism had made him a target. The elevator chimed. Ethan emerged carrying his laptop and looking like he'd had about as much sleep as Charlotte. "Please tell me it's good news," Charlotte said as he sat up at her conference table. "Define good." Ethan opened several files on his laptop. "We've been digging into Hendrix's financial records. Nothing illegal that we can prove, but there's an interesting pattern. He's been buying up property around St. Mary's for the past 18 months. Not through Meridian directly, but through shell companies and subsidiaries. 6 buildings so far, all purchased above market value." Charlotte pulled up a chair. "He's betting on the hospital closing. If St. Mary's gets torn down, all that surrounding property value jumps immediately. He could flip it for triple what he paid." Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The financing for those purchases came from a venture capital firm called Apex Holdings. Ever heard of them? No. Should I have? Probably not. They're based in the Cayman Islands, which usually means they're hiding something. But I had our forensic accountants dig deeper. Ethan pulled up another document. Apex Holdings is majority owned by a trust, and that trust's beneficiary is listed as Grace Hendrix. Charlotte's mind raced through her mental database of business connections. James Hendrix's daughter? Granddaughter. She's 19, a sophomore at Columbia. No business experience that we can find. But she's technically the owner of the fund that's financing her grandfather's entire St. Mary's scheme. He's using her to hide assets, probably to shield them from taxes or his divorce settlement or both. Charlotte felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. This is good. We can use this. There's more. Grace Hendrix maintains an active social media presence, and 3 weeks ago she posted a photo from her grandfather's birthday party with the caption, "Celebrating Grandpa's big hospital project. So proud." She deleted it within an hour, but nothing ever really disappears from the internet, Charlotte finished. That's documentation of his intent, combined with the property purchases and the timing of the extortion attempt. We might have enough to interest the FBI. Financial fraud, conspiracy, possibly RICO charges if we can connect the dots to the men who threatened you. Charlotte stood and paced, her mind working through possibilities and probabilities. How long to build the case? A week. Maybe 10 days if the feds move fast. But there's a complication. Of course there is. If we go to the FBI now, Hendrix will know we're onto him. He might accelerate his timeline, make a more direct move against you or Noah Blake before we can get protection orders in place. So we need to move first. Charlotte turned to face Ethan. Close the St. Mary's deal before he knows we've uncovered his scheme. Once the acquisition is final, he has no leverage, no reason to threaten anyone. In theory, but wounded egos can be dangerous. He might retaliate anyway. Then we make sure he's too busy defending himself to retaliate. We give everything to the FBI the moment St. Mary's is ours. Let them raid his offices, freeze his assets, make his life hell, while we make sure Noah and Eli are protected. Ethan studied her for a long moment. You realize this plan requires everything to go perfectly. One misstep and people get hurt. Everything requires everything to go perfectly. We just work with better lawyers. Charlotte pulled out her phone and started composing emails. Call the St. Mary's board chair. Tell her we're prepared to close tomorrow if they can accommodate. Offer them whatever final concessions they need. I don't care about the money anymore. Ms. Hayes, I don't care, Ethan. Make it happen. As Ethan stepped away to make calls, Charlotte sent a text to Noah. Things are moving faster than expected. Stay alert tomorrow and keep Eli home from school. Call it a sick day. The response came almost immediately. What's happening? Just being cautious. I'll explain everything tomorrow evening. Trust me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm trying. Charlotte stared at those 2 words for a long time. They carried so much weight, the effort it took for Noah to let her into his life, to put his son's safety in her hands, to believe that someone from her world could be trusted with something from his. She would earn that trust, whatever it took. The next morning arrived with rain, a steady downpour that turned the city gray and slicked the streets with reflected neon. Noah called Eli's school and reported a mild fever, ignoring his son's protests that he felt fine. They spent the morning playing board games and watching movies, and Noah tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes for updates from Charlotte. At noon, his phone finally rang. Charlotte's name lit up the screen. We're closing the deal today, she said without preamble. 3 o'clock. The moment the papers are signed, the threat should evaporate. Should? Nothing is certain, but Hendricks loses his leverage, and we're turning over everything we've found to the FBI. He'll have bigger problems than a hospital acquisition. Noah looked over at Eli, who was building an elaborate tower out of blocks on the living room floor. Oblivious. Safe. And after today, what happens to us? The security stays in place for at least another week, just to be safe. But after that, Charlotte paused. After that, you get your life back. The one you had before all this. It should have sounded good, normal, safe. Instead, it sounded empty somehow, though Noah couldn't articulate why. Okay, he said. Keep me posted. Noah, Charlotte's voice went softer. Thank you. For trusting me, for being patient, for not running when you had every right to. Where would I run? This is my home. I know, that's what I'm trying to protect. After she hung up, Noah pulled up the news on his tablet and searched for Hayes Global Investments. The articles were all business-focused, stock prices, quarterly earnings, strategic acquisitions. But there were older stories too, profiles of Charlotte herself, youngest female CEO in her industry, self-made billionaire who'd built her company from a small investment firm her father had left her into a global powerhouse. And there, buried in a profile from 2 years ago, a detail that caught Noah's attention. Charlotte's mother had died when Charlotte was 16. Cancer, misdiagnosed and mistreated at an underfunded hospital that couldn't afford the equipment for early detection. St. Mary's Hospital. Noah set down the tablet, something clicking into place. This wasn't just about business for Charlotte. It wasn't about profit margins or strategic positioning. It was personal in a way she hadn't fully explained because some grief was too private to share with strangers. She was trying to save the place that had failed to save her mother, trying to make sure other kids didn't grow up without a parent because a hospital couldn't afford proper care. Noah understood that impulse in his bones. He'd do anything to protect Eli from the same kind of loss. Maybe Charlotte Hayes wasn't so different from him after all. Maybe they both just understood what it meant to love someone enough to fight for them, even when the odds were terrible and the cost was high. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Noah tried to focus on Eli, on being present, but part of his mind was across town in some conference room where papers were being signed and futures were being decided. At 2:30, he couldn't take it anymore. Hey, buddy, Noah said. Want to go for a drive? Eli looked up from his blocks, suspicious. You said I had to stay home because I was sick. You look better. Fresh air might help. I told you I wasn't actually sick. Yeah, you were right. Come on. They bundled into Noah's beat-up sedan, and Noah drove with no particular destination in mind. Just movement, just the illusion of control. The security car followed at a discreet distance. Noah spotted it 2 turns in. He should have been annoyed, but instead he felt oddly comforted. At some point, Noah realized he was heading toward downtown, toward Morrison Tower, toward Charlotte. Where are we going? Eli asked. Just driving. We're going somewhere. You have that look. What look? The one you get when you're thinking about stuff you don't want to talk about. Noah glanced at his son, struck by how observant Eli had become. When had that happened? When had his boy started reading him so accurately? I'm going to see the lady who helped us, Noah said. Charlotte, just to check in. Is she nice? I think so, yeah. Mom wasn't nice at the end. The statement landed like a punch. Noah had tried so hard to protect Eli from the ugliness of the divorce, from the cold way Sarah had exited their lives. But kids saw things. Kids remembered. Your mom loved you, Noah said carefully. She couldn't handle everything. That wasn't your fault. I know, but Charlotte helped you, even though she doesn't have to. That's nice. Out of the mouths of babes, again. They reached Morrison Tower just after 3. Noah parked across the street, the building's glass facade reflecting the gray sky. People streamed in and out, professionals in expensive suits, moving with purpose and confidence. Charlotte's people. Her world. Noah's phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. It's done. Papers signed. St. Mary's is ours. Another text followed immediately. FBI is picking up Hendricks now. It's over. Noah let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Over. The threat, the danger, the shadows that had followed them for almost a week. Over. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something else. Something complicated and confusing that he didn't want to examine too closely. Dad? Eli was pointing at the building entrance. Isn't that her? Noah looked up. Charlotte was emerging from Morrison Tower, flanked by Ethan and 2 other security personnel. Even from across the street, even through the rain-spattered windshield, Noah could see the exhaustion in her posture, but also the triumph. She'd done it, saved her hospital, and protected them in the process. As if sensing his gaze, Charlotte looked across the street. Her eyes found his car, found him sitting there in his 11-year-old sedan with his son beside him. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the distance. 2 people from different worlds who'd been thrown together by violence and fear, and something neither of them had quite figured out yet. Then Charlotte smiled. Not her corporate smile, not the polished expression Noah had seen in her profile photos. A real smile, tired and genuine and meant just for him. Noah smiled back. Come on, he said to Eli. Let's go say thank you. They dashed across the street through the rain, and Charlotte met them halfway. Her hair was getting wet, her expensive blazer darkening with moisture, but she didn't seem to care. You did it, Noah said. We did it. Charlotte knelt down to Eli's level. Hi, you must be Eli. I'm Charlotte. I know, you're the one my dad saved. That's right, he's very brave. I know that too. Eli studied her with the frank assessment only children can pull off. Are you the reason we had to stay home today? Charlotte glanced up at Noah, who shrugged. He's observant. I was being careful, Charlotte told Eli, making sure you and your dad stayed safe while some grown-up problems got sorted out. But it's all fixed now. So no more fake sick days? No more fake sick days. Good. I was missing a field trip, Charlotte laughed, the sound bright against the gray afternoon. Well, we can't have that. She stood, addressing Noah. Walk with me? Just for a minute? Ethan and the security team gave them space, though Noah knew they were watching every angle. Charlotte led them to a small plaza adjacent to the tower, where a few hardy trees grew despite the urban environment. The rain had slowed to a mist. So that's it? Noah asked. We're really safe now? Hendricks is in FBI custody. His assets are frozen. The men from the alley are in the wind, but without Hendrix's money and protection, they have no reason to come after you. So yes, you're safe. Just like that. Just like that. Charlotte wrapped her arms around herself, and Noah realized she was cold. He shrugged out of his jacket, old, worn, nothing fancy, and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. She looked down at it, then back up at him, something indefinable in her expression. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's just a jacket." "I don't think you know how to do anything without being kind," Charlotte said. "Even when you probably want to throttle me for dragging you into this mess." The thought crossed my mind a few times. Noah smiled to take the edge off the words. "But throttling billionaires is probably frowned upon. Extremely frowned upon. Bad for business." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Eli investigate a puddle near one of the trees. The city moved around them, cars, people, life continuing in all its chaotic normalcy. "What happens now?" Noah asked. "With us, I mean, do we just go back to how things were?" Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him, and Noah saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Uncertainty, vulnerability. The same question he was asking reflected back at him. "I don't know," she admitted. "The logical thing would be to shake hands, say it was nice knowing you, and return to our separate lives. You drive rideshare and raise your son. I run my company and pretend I'm making a difference. We probably never cross paths again. That's the logical thing." "Yes." "What's the illogical thing?" Charlotte smiled, sad and hopeful at the same time. "The illogical thing would be admitting that meeting you changed something for me. That watching you nearly die for a stranger made me question every assumption I had about people and kindness and what actually matters. That I've spent the last week thinking about you more than is probably appropriate for someone you've known less than 2 weeks." Noah's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. "That does sound pretty illogical. Extremely illogical. Good thing I'm not great at logic anyway." Noah stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Charlotte's green eyes. "I keep thinking about what you said. About people doing things without calculating the return on investment. Maybe some things don't need to make sense. Maybe they just need to feel right." "Does this feel right?" Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper. "Terrifying," Noah admitted. "But yeah, right." Eli's voice interrupted the moment. "Dad, there's a really cool bug over here." They both laughed, the tension breaking into something lighter. Charlotte handed Noah back his jacket. "Your son needs you," she said. "Yeah, he does." But Noah didn't move yet. "Charlotte, this isn't over, is it? Whatever this is between us, we're not just walking away." "I don't think I could if I tried," Charlotte said, "but I don't know how this works. Our lives are so different." "So we figure it out. No calculations, no strategies. Just one day at a time. See what happens." "One day at a time," Charlotte repeated, testing the words. Then, with more conviction, "Okay, yes, let's try that." "Dad!" Eli called again, more insistent. "Coming, buddy," Noah called back. He looked at Charlotte one more time. "Thursday, the follow-up doctor's appointment. You remember?" "I remember. Marcus will pick you up at 1:30. Tell Marcus I'll drive myself. But maybe you could meet me there? After? Get coffee or something?" Charlotte's smile was genuine, unguarded, beautiful. "I'd like that." As Noah walked back to his son, as Charlotte returned to her security team and her billion-dollar life, as the city continued its indifferent rotation around them both, neither of them knew exactly what they'd just started. They only knew that a chance encounter in a dark alley had set something in motion that logic couldn't explain and fear couldn't stop. Sometimes the best decisions were the ones that didn't make sense on paper. Sometimes you just had to take a chance on a stranger who'd proven they'd take a bullet for you. Sometimes you had to believe that different worlds could find a way to intersect, if both people were brave enough to try. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made the city look almost new. Noah stood in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to decide if he needed to shave. The stubble made him look tired, or maybe that was just the reality of being a single father who'd been shot less than 2 weeks ago. He ran the razor over his jaw anyway, nicking himself twice in the process. You're nervous, Eli observed from the doorway, still in his pajamas despite it being nearly noon. I'm not nervous. You only cut yourself shaving when you're nervous, like before my parent-teacher conference last year. Noah dabbed at the blood with toilet paper. That was different. I was worried your teacher would tell me you weren't doing your homework. I always do my homework. Eli padded into the bathroom and stood beside his father, both of them reflected in the small mirror. You're nervous about seeing Charlotte. There was no point in lying. Eli saw through him with the kind of clarity that made Noah simultaneously proud and uncomfortable. Maybe a little. She's nice. I liked her. You talked to her for like 2 minutes. That's all it takes to know if someone's nice or not. She looked at me like I was a real person, not just a kid. And she looked at you like... Eli paused, searching for words. Like how you look at your coffee in the morning, like she really needed it. Noah laughed despite himself. I don't think that's quite... You know what I mean? Eli leaned against the doorframe. Mom never looked at you like that. Not even in the pictures from when I was little. The observation was delivered matter-of-factly, without judgment or hurt, which somehow made it worse. Noah had tried so hard to shield Eli from the slow dissolution of his marriage, but kids absorbed everything. They cataloged moments and expressions and absences, building their understanding of love from whatever pieces they could gather. Your mom loved us in her own way, Noah said, the words automatic and hollow even to his own ears. I know, but it wasn't enough. Eli looked up at his father, his brown eyes serious. Charlotte's way might be enough. You should find out. Noah knelt down to his son's eye level, ignoring the protest from his healing shoulder. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Fair point. Noah pulled Eli into a one-armed hug. What would I do without you? Probably cut yourself shaving a lot more. The doctor's appointment was at the medical center attached to Morrison Tower, another reminder of Charlotte's world, where healthcare came with marble floors and original artwork on the walls. Dr. Reeves met Noah in an examination room that looked more like a hotel suite than a medical facility. Mr. Blake, you're healing remarkably well, she said after examining his shoulder. The range of motion is better than I expected. How's the pain? Manageable. The pills help. Good. I'm going to clear you for light work. No heavy lifting for another 2 weeks, but you can resume most normal activities. Dr. Reeves typed notes into her tablet. You're lucky. Very lucky. So I keep hearing. I mean it. The trajectory of that bullet, if it had been half an inch to the left, we'd be having a very different conversation. If we were having one at all. Noah nodded, the weight of that reality settling over him again. Half an inch. The difference between being here and being gone, between Eli having a father and being alone. Chance and trajectory and dumb luck. Or maybe not luck. Maybe just the universe's way of saying his story wasn't finished yet. After the appointment, Noah made his way down to the lobby, where he'd agreed to meet Charlotte. She wasn't there yet, so he stood near the windows and watched the city move past. Professionals in business attire hurried along the sidewalks, absorbed in phones and conversations. A different pace of life than his neighborhood, where people moved slower because they had nowhere urgent to be, no empire to build or maintain. Sorry I'm late. Noah turned to find Charlotte approaching, and something in his chest tightened. She was dressed casually, at least casual for her, in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was loose, falling past her shoulders, and she wasn't wearing the corporate armor he'd seen in her office. She looked younger, less guarded, almost uncertain. You're not late. I'm early. How did the appointment go? Clean bill of health? Well, cleaner. I'm officially allowed to lift things again. That's good. Charlotte smiled, but Noah could see tension in the set of her shoulders. There's a coffee shop around the corner. It's not fancy, but the coffee's good. They walked in companionable silence, and Noah noticed that Charlotte kept glancing at him like she was memorizing details. The way he favored his right side slightly, the rhythm of his gait, small things that meant nothing and everything. The coffee shop was exactly as advertised. Not fancy, just a neighborhood place with mismatched furniture and the kind of lived-in comfort that came from years of serving the same customers. Charlotte ordered something complicated with oat milk and extra shots. Noah got black coffee, earning an approving nod from the barista who looked like she'd seen it all twice. They found a table in the back corner, away from the handful of other customers. Charlotte wrapped her hands around her cup but didn't drink, just held it like she needed something to anchor her. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about figuring this out one day at a time. And I want to try. I really do. But I need you to understand what you'd be getting into. Okay? My life is complicated. The company requires constant attention. I have board meetings and investor calls and strategic planning sessions that run until midnight. I travel frequently, sometimes with only a few hours' notice. I have enemies, Noah. Real ones. People who would use anyone close to me as leverage. Like Hendrix. And there will be others. There always are when you have what I have." Charlotte finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "I can't promise you safety or normalcy or anything resembling a simple life. And you have Eli to think about. He deserves stability, not whatever chaos comes with being connected to me." Noah took a sip of his coffee, considering his words carefully. "You're right. Eli does deserve stability. And for 3 years, I've given him exactly that. Same apartment, same school, same routine day after day. Safe and predictable and small." "There's nothing wrong with that." "There's nothing wrong with it," Noah agreed. "But there's also nothing particularly right about it either. My kid is growing up watching me work myself to exhaustion just to keep our heads above water. He's learning that life is about survival, not joy. That you don't take chances because chances are dangerous. They are dangerous. So is stepping into alleys when you see someone in trouble. So is throwing yourself in front of bullets. So is every single thing worth doing." Noah leaned forward. "Charlotte, I'm not naive. I know your world is different from mine. I know there are risks. But you know what the biggest risk is? Teaching my son that we should play it safe, that we should settle for less because more might be complicated. This isn't just complicated. This is terrifying. Yeah, I know. I'm terrified. You're this brilliant, successful woman who runs a billion-dollar company, and I'm a rideshare driver who can barely afford his electric bill. On paper, we make no sense. But Charlotte, when I woke up in your penthouse and you were standing there looking at me like you couldn't quite believe I was real, I don't know. Something clicked. Something that had nothing to do with money or status or any of the stuff that's supposed to matter." Charlotte's eyes were bright, and Noah realized she was fighting tears. "What if I'm not as good as you think I am? What if the person you think you know is just a fantasy you've built around someone who saved your life? You mean the person who's spent the last 2 weeks working around the clock to keep me and my son safe? The person who's renovating a hospital instead of tearing it down for profit? The person who smiled at my kid like he mattered?" Noah shook his head. "That's not fantasy. That's who you are when you're not hiding behind boardroom tactics." "I don't know how to not hide," Charlotte whispered. "I've been building walls for so long." "Then let me help you take them down. Brick by brick, one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just see what happens." Charlotte wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so vulnerable and unglamorous that Noah felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of her. This wasn't Charlotte Hayes, CEO. This was just Charlotte, scared and hoping and trying to figure out if she was brave enough to want something for herself. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, one day at a time, starting with today." "What did you have in mind?" Noah grinned. "Well, I promised Eli I'd take him to the arcade this afternoon, the one by the old movie theater. You know it?" "I don't think I've ever been to an arcade." "Then you're in for an education. Fair warning, Eli is ruthless at skee-ball. He will destroy your dignity." Charlotte laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "I should probably get back to the office. I have a conference call at 3. "Or," Noah said carefully, "you could come with us. Play some games, eat some questionable pizza. Remember what it's like to do something just because it's fun." "Noah, I can't just—" "Why not? The company won't collapse in an afternoon. And if it does, it probably wasn't that solid to begin with." Charlotte stared at him like he'd suggested they rob a bank. "That's not how business works." "Maybe that's the problem." Noah stood and held out his hand. "Come on, live dangerously. Skip your conference call. Eat pizza that's definitely been under a heat lamp for too long. Lose at skee-ball to an 8-year-old. For a long moment, Charlotte just looked at his outstretched hand. Noah could practically see the internal debate. Responsibility versus impulse. The CEO versus the woman who'd admitted she didn't know how to stop hiding. Then she took his hand. "One afternoon," she said. "But I'm not losing to an 8-year-old. I'm very competitive." "I noticed." They picked up Eli from Mrs. Chen's apartment, and the boy's face lit up when he saw Charlotte. "You came!" "Apparently I'm getting an education in skee-ball," Charlotte said. "Oh, you're going to lose so bad." The arcade was exactly as Noah had described, loud, chaotic, filled with flashing lights and the electronic sounds of games from several different decades. It smelled like industrial carpet and candy and the kind of concentrated joy that only came from children being allowed to be children. Charlotte stood in the entrance, looking slightly overwhelmed. Marcus and one other security guard had followed them, maintaining a discreet distance, but Noah could tell Charlotte was hyper-aware of their presence. "You can send them away," Noah said quietly. "Just for an hour. Live a little." Charlotte glanced at her security team, then at Eli, who was already tugging her toward the token machine. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. Marcus nodded and withdrew, taking his colleague with him. They'd still be outside, Noah knew, but at least they weren't hovering. "Okay," Charlotte said, taking a deep breath. "Teach me." The next 2 hours were a revelation. Noah watched Charlotte transform from the controlled, careful CEO into someone who shrieked with laughter when Eli beat her at air hockey, who pumped her fist when she finally won a round of skee-ball, who got genuinely competitive during a racing game and nearly fell off her stool trying to take a sharp turn. "You're terrible at this," Eli announced delightedly during a zombie shooter game. "I've never shot a gun in my life. It's fake guns, just point and click. I am pointing and clicking. The zombies are too fast." Noah leaned against a nearby game, just watching. This was Charlotte without the armor, without the calculated responses and strategic thinking. This was someone who'd probably never had a normal childhood, who'd grown up fast and built empires instead of memories, now getting a second chance at joy through his son's enthusiasm. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Everything okay? You've been gone a while." Noah snapped a photo of Charlotte and Eli at the basketball game, both of them intensely focused, and sent it back with the caption, "Better than okay." Mrs. Chen's response was a string of smiley faces and hearts, followed by, "About time." When they finally exhausted the arcade's appeal, they emerged into the late afternoon sun, Eli clutching a small stuffed bear he'd won from the claw machine and chattering about high scores. Charlotte's hair was messy, her cheeks flushed, and she looked happier than Noah had ever seen her. "That was—" she started, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "I don't remember the last time I just played. No agenda, no goal, just fun." "Fun is underrated," Noah said. "Apparently." They walked back toward Noah's car, Eli running ahead to investigate interesting storefronts. Charlotte's phone had been buzzing periodically, but she'd ignored it. Now she pulled it out and glanced at the screen, her expression flickering. 43 missed calls, she said. 18 from my assistant, 10 from board members, the rest from various executives who apparently think the world is ending. Is it? Charlotte looked at the phone, then at Eli, then at Noah. She powered it off completely and dropped it back in her purse. If it is, they can handle it without me for one evening. Charlotte, one day at a time, remember? Today isn't over yet. They ended up at Noah's apartment, ordering pizza that was significantly better than arcade pizza, but still arriving in grease-stained boxes. Eli gave Charlotte a tour of their small space, pointing out his school projects on the refrigerator and the crack in the TV screen that made everyone look slightly distorted. This is our place, Eli said with simple pride. It's not fancy, but it's home. Charlotte knelt down beside the couch, examining a photo on the side table. Noah and Eli at the beach, both of them sunburned and grinning, building what looked like an ambitious sandcastle. You look happy here. We are, Noah said. Mostly, when we're not worried about bills or bullet wounds. Charlotte smiled. Fair. After dinner, Eli started fading, his energy finally depleted. Noah carried him to bed, tucking him in and brushing hair off his forehead. When he returned to the living room, Charlotte was standing at the window, looking out at the neighborhood lights. Thank you for today, she said without turning around. I didn't realize how much I needed it. Skee-ball is therapeutic. It really is. Charlotte turned to face him. Noah, I want this, whatever this is. But I need you to be honest with me. Can you really handle my life, the schedule, the pressure, the constant scrutiny? Noah crossed the room until he was standing in front of her. I don't know, honestly, but I know I want to try. And I know that when I think about the future, I want you in it. You and Eli and maybe something that looks like a family if we're brave enough. I've never had that, Charlotte admitted. A family, I mean. Not really. My father died when I was 12, my mother when I was 16. I built the company to honor them, but also to avoid feeling alone. Work filled the space where people should have been. You're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. Charlotte reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. What if I'm terrible at this, at being with someone, at being part of a family? Then you'll learn, same as everyone else. Noah covered her hand with his. Charlotte, you stepped into that alley alone because you thought you had to handle everything yourself. But you don't. Not anymore. Let me be there. Let me help carry some of the weight. You already got shot carrying my weight. And I'd do it again, but hopefully we can avoid that scenario going forward. Charlotte laughed, the sound catching somewhere between humor and tears. I have terrible taste in business partners and apparently worse taste in dating choices. Is that what this is? Dating? I think so. I'm honestly not sure. It's been a very long time. Noah smiled and pulled her closer, careful of his healing shoulder. Then let's call it that. Dating. Going steady. Whatever the kids are saying these days. I don't think anyone says going steady anymore. Shows what I know. They stood like that for a long moment, Charlotte's head resting against Noah's chest, his good arm wrapped around her. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and car horns, and the sound of lives being lived. Inside, everything was quiet except for their breathing. I should go, Charlotte said eventually, though she didn't move. It's late. You could stay. The couch is surprisingly comfortable if you don't want to go back to an empty penthouse. Charlotte pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? I'm sure. Noah smiled. Besides, Eli will be thrilled to have breakfast with you. Mrs. Chen makes amazing waffles on Friday mornings. Mrs. Chen makes you breakfast? She makes everyone breakfast. It's her thing, you'll see. Charlotte borrowed an old t-shirt and sweatpants that were comically large on her frame. She looked absurd and perfect, standing in Noah's small bathroom brushing her teeth with a spare toothbrush, her billionaire polish stripped away to reveal someone softer underneath. They said goodnight awkwardly, both hyper-aware of the strangeness and rightness of the moment. Noah retreated to his bedroom while Charlotte settled on the couch, with a blanket Eli had picked out years ago, covered in cartoon dinosaurs and worn soft with use. Noah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Charlotte shift on the couch in the next room. This was insane. This was wonderful. This was terrifying and hopeful, and absolutely nothing like he'd planned for his life. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a struggling single father with no prospects beyond making rent and keeping his son fed. Now he was, what? Dating a billionaire? Falling for someone so far outside his experience that he had no roadmap, no precedent, no idea if this could possibly work? His phone buzzed, a text from Charlotte, sent from the living room. Are you awake? Noah smiled and typed back. Yeah, couch okay? Couch is perfect. Just wanted to say, today was one of the best days I've had in years. Thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on us. I'm glad I did. Good night, Noah. Good night, Charlotte. Noah set down his phone and closed his eyes, a smile still playing at his lips. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or complications or moments of doubt, they'd face together, one day at a time. In the living room, Charlotte pulled the dinosaur blanket up to her chin and stared at the unfamiliar ceiling of Noah's apartment. Her phone was still powered off. Her company was probably in controlled chaos. Tomorrow she'd have to face the consequences of abandoning her responsibilities for an entire evening. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Charlotte Hayes felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Morning arrived with the smell of waffles and Mrs. Chen's cheerful voice calling up the stairs. Charlotte woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then she saw the dinosaur blanket, heard Eli's laugh from somewhere nearby, and remembered. She'd spent the night on Noah Blake's couch. She'd turned off her phone and ignored her company and played skee-ball with an 8-year-old. She'd done everything wrong by her usual standards. It felt amazing. Eli appeared around the corner, still in his pajamas. "Charlotte, Mrs. Chen made waffles. Dad says you should come down." The morning was gloriously chaotic. Mrs. Chen's apartment was smaller than Noah's, crammed with furniture and photographs and the accumulated comfort of a life well lived. The elderly woman took one look at Charlotte in Noah's oversized clothes and beamed. "Finally," Mrs. Chen said, heaping waffles onto Charlotte's plate. "This one needs someone. He's too good at being alone." "Mrs. Chen," Noah protested, his ears reddening. "It's true. You work too hard, you never go out. You think that boy doesn't notice you're lonely." Mrs. Chen turned to Charlotte. "You're good for him. I can tell." "We've only known each other 2 weeks," Charlotte pointed out. "So? I knew my husband 3 days before I knew I'd marry him. Time doesn't matter. Heart matters." Charlotte caught Noah's eye across the table. He shrugged as if to say, "This is my life. Welcome to it." And Charlotte found herself thinking that she'd gladly welcome herself to it if he'd let her stay. After breakfast, reality began creeping back in. Charlotte turned on her phone and immediately regretted it as notifications flooded the screen. Hundreds of emails, dozens of voicemails, text messages from people ranging from concerned to panicked to angry. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "Damage control." "I know." Noah walked her to the door. "But tonight? Maybe dinner? Somewhere nice?" Define nice. "Tablecloths. Real ones, not paper." Charlotte laughed. "I think I can manage that. Pick you up at 7? I'll be ready." She leaned in and kissed him, brief and soft and full of promise. Then she was gone, Marcus and the security detail materializing to escort her back to her world of board meetings and corporate warfare. Noah stood in the doorway, watching her go, and felt Eli slip his hand into his father's. "She's coming back, right?" Eli asked. "Yeah, buddy, she's coming back." "Good. I like her." "Me too." The next several months unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance between two people learning each other's rhythms. Charlotte made time in her impossible schedule for dinners and arcade visits and quiet evenings in Noah's apartment. Noah began accepting that Marcus driving him places wasn't charity, just practicality. Eli got used to Charlotte's presence, stopped treating her like a novelty, and started treating her like family. The board of St. Mary's Hospital officially approved the renovation plans. Charlotte attended the groundbreaking ceremony with Noah and Eli beside her, cameras flashing and questions being shouted, and she held Noah's hand through all of it without caring who saw or what they thought. James Hendricks pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. He'd served 10 years minimum, and his business empire had crumbled under federal investigation. Charlotte felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that the threat was truly over. Noah got a job offer, head of operations for Hayes Global's new community investment division, overseeing projects like the hospital renovation. The salary was more than he'd made in the past 5 years combined. He almost turned it down out of pride before Charlotte pointed out that he was literally the most qualified person she knew for understanding what communities actually needed. "You grew up in neighborhoods like this," she said. "You've lived the struggle. That perspective is invaluable. Oh, or you just want to see me in a suit. That too, but mostly the first thing." 8 months after a bullet had brought them together, Noah stood in Charlotte's penthouse, the same room where he'd woken up after being shot, though it felt like a lifetime ago. The sun was setting over the city, painting the glass towers in shades of amber and rose. "I've been thinking," Charlotte said, coming to stand beside him at the window. "This place is too big for one person." "It's definitely big. And your apartment is too small for 3 people. Noah's heart skipped. "Are you? Move in with me, you and Eli, not because you have to, not because of money or convenience, but because I wake up every morning wishing you were here, because Eli should have space for all his projects and books and whatever 8-year-olds need, because I want to build something real with you, and real things need foundation. Noah turned to face her fully. That's a big step. I know. Too big? Too fast? Maybe, Noah smiled. But I've never been good at playing it safe, and Eli deserves to grow up somewhere he doesn't have to worry about the heat turning off in winter. Is that a yes? That's a yes. But on one condition. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with me? Always. The condition is, we get a dog. Eli's been asking for years, and we never had space. Now we do. Charlotte laughed, bright and free. Done, but I'm picking the breed. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss, the city sprawling below them in all its chaotic beauty. Two people from different worlds who'd found a way to build a bridge between them, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of bravery leading to the next. A year later, on the anniversary of the night that had changed everything, Noah and Charlotte stood in the newly renovated St. Mary's Hospital, cutting the ribbon at the grand reopening. The facility gleamed with new equipment and fresh paint, but more importantly, it hummed with the energy of doctors and nurses ready to serve the community that had waited so long for quality care. Eli stood between them, holding the scissors, grinning at the cameras. Their dog, a golden retriever Charlotte had insisted on naming Investment until Eli overruled her with Buddy, sat patiently at Noah's feet. This is good, Charlotte whispered to Noah as the applause died down. This is what matters. Yeah, Noah agreed. It really is. Later that night, after the speeches and the tours and the celebrations, they returned to the penthouse, now filled with Eli's drawings and Buddy's toys and the comfortable chaos of a family that had learned to exist in the space between different worlds. Noah tucked Eli into bed in a room that finally had enough space for all his dreams, and returned to find Charlotte on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. What are you thinking? Noah asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That none of this was part of my plan. Not you, not Eli, not learning that the best return on investment can't be measured in dollars. Regretting it? Not for a second. Charlotte turned in his arms. You know, the crazy thing is, that bullet missed your heart by 2 inches. 2 inches, and we never would have had this, any of this. Guess I should send that guy a thank you card. Charlotte laughed and swatted his arm. That's terrible. Too soon? Way too soon. They stood together in the warm night air, the city breathing around them, full of other stories and other chances and other moments where courage intersected with fate. Somewhere out there, someone was making a choice that would change everything. Someone was stepping into an alley when they should walk away. Someone was taking a risk on a stranger, on a chance, on the terrifying possibility that love might exist in the spaces between logic and calculation. Noah Blake had taken that bullet for a woman he didn't know, in an alley that wasn't his concern, because some part of him understood that the world was built on small acts of bravery. He'd woken up in a penthouse that should have been foreign, been protected by people he couldn't pay, and fallen for someone whose life intersected his in ways that should have been impossible. And Charlotte Hayes had learned that all her money and power couldn't buy what a struggling rideshare driver had given freely. The willingness to sacrifice for a stranger, to hope despite evidence, to believe that people could be kind without expecting return. Together, they'd built something that made sense only because they'd stopped trying to make sense of it. They just lived it, one day at a time, one small choice leading to the next, until choices became routine and routine became home. The city lights sparkled below them like promises made and kept. Inside, Eli slept peacefully, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dream when they finally feel secure. Buddy snored on his expensive dog bed that Charlotte had insisted on and Noah had pretended to protest. The coffee machine was set to brew at 6 a.m., programmed for 2 cups instead of 1. This was their life now, built on a bullet and a chance encounter, on fear transformed into courage, on the desperate hope that sometimes different worlds could find a way to merge. Thank you, Charlotte said quietly. For what? For stepping into that alley, for being stupid and brave and changing everything. Noah smiled and pulled her closer. Thank you for waking me up in your penthouse instead of just sending me home. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Noah corrected. The dog was clearly the best decision. Charlotte laughed, the sound echoing into the night, and Noah thought that this moment, this woman, This life they'd accidentally built together was worth every bullet, every threat, every moment of fear and uncertainty. Some prices were worth paying, some risks were worth taking, some strangers were worth saving, and some love stories began in darkness but found their way to light, one brave step at a time, until the distance between two worlds disappeared completely, and all that remained was the view from the top, not of the city below, but of the life they'd built together against all odds and logic. A life that made no sense on paper, but perfect sense in every way that mattered.